Alright, here we go with the final round, and we are on the draw, and have a great hand. So, 2 Thoughtseize, 3 Sack Lance, Death Shadow, perfect. Perfect. Alright, so Bloodstained Mire, Blood Crypt, and own Thoughtseize, taking Death Shadow. So, probably the mirror match is what we're assuming, but could just be bigger Jund as well. So we're going to fetch up a Blood Crypt and then cast our own Thoughtseize. And just drawing Dismember was actually pretty good for us. So opponent's hand is Kolaghan's Command, Street Wraith, Overgrown Tomb, Traverse, and Thoughtseize. So our opponent doesn't really have Delirium yet, although they could end up getting it if they hit like a Mishra's Bauble. But it's unlikely they'll be able to traverse for like a big Death Shadow next turn. So we just take our opponent's Thoughtseize, which is going to protect our Tarmogoyf, which might be the only creature for a little while. So Street Wraith into Street Wraith from our opponent, and they're getting low, so they do draw Mishra's Bauble, and a Death Shadow. So the good thing about this is we do have Dismember and Thoughtseize, so we should be able to disrupt this in theory. And we even get to Thoughtseize first to make sure our opponent can't save their Death Shadow if we try to dismember it, although actually we just knew our opponent's hand at that point. So here we're just going to take Traverse because they would be able to traverse into another Death Shadow, as well as just go ahead and dismember that. And we even fetch up a Force because we're actually a little bit concerned about our life total here. So Street Wraith into Polluted Delta into Thoughtseize. So our opponent still just has Kolaghan's Command and wanted to disrupt us, and Thoughtseize not a bad draw. So here we are. Here we are. Opponent at 5. I'm at 6, and we both are top decking. Welcome to the Death Shadow mirror. So opponent at 4, which means another Tarfire or Kolaghan's Command is actually going to be lethal. For now, though, we're just going to wait and see what we draw, because we don't want to be actually Tarfiring them if they play a Death Shadow and then we have our own Death Shadow. So the problem with this play is I probably shouldn't have sacked my sack land, because now if our opponent draws Death Shadow and so do we have to Tarfire ourselves to make it bigger, which isn't that great. I probably should have just kept the Tarfire or the sack land. So opponent drew Street Wraith, which if they do decide to cycle, they are going to die. So interesting that they aren't cycling it, though, because, I mean, Tarfire isn't that likely for me to have. And I probably shouldn't have even cast it. I mean, assuming our opponent gets itchy trigger finger there, I probably should have just kept the Tarfire, and our opponent could have potentially cycled Street Wraith at some point if they weren't wise to the Tarfire plan. The reason I did cast it, of course, is if I drew Kolaghan's Command, I would just win on the spot. But that definitely not worth it, I don't think, so should have played that more cautiously. Alright, so drew Traverse, finally, for a bit of sweet action. And opponent drew Kolaghan's Command this turn, which means their Death Shadow is going to be bigger than our Death Shadow, which is a bit of a problem. And so we need to draw something good, and Liliana is in fact something good. Liliana is perfect. So made a few sequencing decisions there, I think, but kind of got bailed out at the end with the Liliana. Sideboarding in the mirror. So Nihil Spellbomb, great, because the graveyard is so important, especially if our opponent is going to be Lingering Soulsing. Fatal Push, absolutely amazing. Liliana of the Last Hope is okay. Vrals is okay. Maelstrom Pulse, not that great because it hits your own creatures. If you both have Death Shadow and then you pulse their Death Shadow, it's going to get rid of it. But removal is important. Also, like Surgical, because of how few threats Death Shadow has. If you Inquisition a Death Shadow and then Surgical it, that changes the entire scape of the game. Can also disrupt Delirium or shrink a Tarmogoyf, which is relevant. I like to take the more control route by siding out sort of the instant win, kill your opponent cards. I prefer to focus on removal and just having threats, which means that Tamir Battle Rage, Gorklan Rampage are not as necessary. So just bringing these in is pretty good. You could also bring in the Vrals as well as another big threat in the late game. Probably worth it over like a Kolaghan's Command or Inquisition as well. Inquisition probably better on the draw, but yeah, probably worth it to get rid of Inquisitions for this sort of thing on the play, but on the draw, Inquisition is probably a bit more important. Could also keep in one Tarfire over an Inquisition, reasonable as well. So something along these lines, I would say, is pretty decent sideboarding plan. So game 2, on the draw, tossing this hand, too much land, and snap keeping this. Mishra's Bauble, Street Wraith, Sackland, Fatal Push, Death Shadow can cast everything in the hand already except Liliana, and see Inquisition. So actually not bad with this hand because we have all 1-drops anyways. We just want to grind through our opponent, hope they draw too many lands, and that we can sort of win that way by just dealing with everything they have. So our opponent Inquisitions us, takes Fatal Push. So even more happy to have the Inquisition on top. So lead with the Mishra's Bauble, see Tarmogoyf on top. So we could draw that with Street Wraith. Thing is, we can't actually cast Tarmogoyf, which means that we're just going to shuffle it away and cast our Inquisition. And see a pretty unexciting hand of Traverse, Death Shadow, Kolaghan's Command, Swamp, Verdant Catacombs. So we actually don't want Kolaghan's Command to make us discard a card when we're playing an Attrition War. And our opponent is not able to traverse, not able to Death Shadow, so we just take the K command for now. And the K command would be able to return the Death Shadow as well, which would be an issue. Alright, and our opponent draws Tarmogoyf, which is probably one of their best draws. That isn't something like a bunch of Street Wraiths. Alright, so we have our own Inquisition, so we cycle our Street Wraith, and we need a land right now. We actually have Delirium, so we're just going to get straight up Blood Crypt since we don't really need to damage ourselves, considering there's a Tarmogoyf in play. Maybe it was a consideration to get the sack land just because the Tarmogoyf can choose to not attack us here, and that would have allowed us to Death Shadow. So probably a bit of an oversight there. Alright, hit Traverse and a way to damage ourselves, so that's pretty good. So we Traverse, get another land, so we can damage ourselves with the land and potentially make our Death Shadow big enough. We could even extract our own Mishra's Bauble to shrink the Tarmogoyf in a pinch as well. And our opponent has Liliana, which is not good for us. So we are drawing fairly thin now, considering all things. So we just traverse our opponent. We get to see their deck, see their Lingering Souls, see their Ranger. I could have also tried to preserve my life total by surgically in my own Mishra's Bauble. That would have shrunk the Tarmogoyf, but that doesn't particularly change much. We kind of are just in trouble here no matter what. And Death Shadow does buy us a turn, but the issue is the Liliana at this point. And our opponent even has another Death Shadow. And we're just dead, because they're going to make a sack there. So we go to game 3. Alright, so game 3, another good hand, I'd say. Have Traverse if we need another land, have Fatal Push, have Surgical. No hand disruption, but that's okay for now. So we start by traversing because we want this land pretty much no matter what, and do get a swamp to make sure we have all our colors of mana. This is an issue though. We might have just wanted Overgrown Tomb for Liliana based considerations, but if we're getting up to Liliana, that means we've drawn another land anyways. So get our Inquisition, get our Surgical Inquisition, and our opponent has a good start. And we draw Tarmogoyf, which is great for us, since we're actually not all that capable of damaging ourselves to play Death Shadow. And our opponent's stuck on 1 mana, which is great for us as well. And we draw, again, a great card, which is going to get us closer to Street Wraith. So Thoughtseize is also not bad. And our opponent's hand is Death Shadow, Tarmogoyf, Tarmogoyf, Abrupt Decay, Fatal Push. So they can't Death Shadow, they can't Tarmogoyf, they can't Abrupt Decay, they can Fatal Push. Everything else they need help with. So we're gonna hope that they don't draw anything amazing and that we do draw something amazing. Alright, and they do in fact whiff, it seems, and we do not whiff, which is fantastic. So we'll be able to Death Shadow and crack 3/3 Death Shadow. And of course we don't actually want to start attacking our opponent too soon, because that'll make it so they can cast their own bigger Death Shadows. So we're just gonna wait. And we did bring in the Rampager, it appears, as an option, which is not looking that great. So we just develop Vrals here. Gonna be great with Tarmogoyf. We're gonna be able to set up for just an automatic win, a 1-turn kill here if our opponent keeps whiffing. And Street Wraith, also a great draw. So go ahead and scavenge Vrals. I should have cycled this immediately to see what I drew, because we actually could have had potential lethal depending on what this hit. Like, if we hit a land, we actually would have had lethal. Although, wouldn't have necessarily went in with the Rampager against Fatal Push. Like, our opponent, if we had have, like, we could have Rampaged this, it would have put us pretty low. Yeah, we probably would have just went for the win, although at this point we have the win pretty much locked up since we have Fatal Push, Abrupt Decay anyways. We can regenerate our Virals from any removal, so yeah. Not exactly the smoothest sequencing, I'd say, but the mirror match is pretty tricky, and we got there in the end.